next item is 7G, the finance report. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm crossing off the map data report. Tammy, I'm sorry. Please come forward.
I'm going to stand over here by the board because you know how I like to use the board. While Ms. Preston is bringing that up, I first want to kind of go over a couple things about, first of all, what is the MAP assessment? MAP stands for Measures of Academic Progress, and it is a test that the kids take on the computer in reading, math, and language 3 times of the year. And what does it measure? The best way to kind of look at this is in terms of it's the same as if you are taking the measurement of the height of your child 3 times of the year, and you're marking that on the door, and you're looking at how much they're growing. That's what we want to look at with MAP, is how much our kids are growing along with their achievement. And the computer-generated assessment is such that as I'm taking it, if I'm getting the questions correct, then I'm going to get harder questions. If I miss those, then the next question's easy. So it's computer adapted based on the student, and the way that it is statistically measured is they say that kids should get about 50% of the questions correct, and then it generates what is called a RIT score, R-I-T. And that RIT score stands for Roush unit, but it's a statistical measure that's kind of equal interval, just like your inches if you were measuring the height of a student, okay? So this is our winter MAP data report, and there's a lot of numbers and it's a lot of information just in this one page. And so when you're looking at this, the first thing that I always do is I shade the cells according to whether we are above or below the norm, the average, okay, nationally. And so when you're looking at the reading data, you're going to see that there are some dips. And any cell that is shaded red, we're below the norm, green is above, and then in parentheses afterwards, it lets you know as a grade level, is that above or below where we were at this time last year. So really keeping an eye on things. The reason that we do this assessment in the middle of the year, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's letting us know if there are areas that we need to tend to. And so as you can see, there are. And so we have to do that. The schools know that they have to do that. And the intensity and the focus is at a very high level. It always is, but even more, looking at these areas. This table right here demonstrates the proficiency or distinguished categories predictions, and you can see that these numbers are in the primary grades are a little bit less than what we would want them to be. The best rule of thumb on an assessment such as this is that we would want these numbers closer to the 50th percentile. If you scroll down to the percent of novice, the goal is that these would be below 10%. Okay, so that's the reading. So if we scroll on to the math, you're going to see the same setup, the same shading of the green or the red, the same indication if a grade level has went up or down compared to this time last year. You're going to see the proficiency predictions. You're going to see the percent of novice. So we're keeping an eye on all of those things. If you continue, and I'll get Teresa just kind of just scroll, we won't look at every single grade level. Just letting you know, specifically for kindergarten, since you just looked at kindergarten readiness data, you will see that kindergarten did not take it in the fall because they had the Brugance testing. You don't want to, their first experiences with school, you don't want to test the kids on the computer. So they did take it in the winter, so we have our preliminary data. It's not unusual for that to be below the norm because we just saw where our data was before they enter school. You can see the trend for every single year, for every grade level. So you can kind of look to see where we're at. I keep it from all the way back from when we first started the assessments so that we can kind of look at the trends throughout the years. So something else, if Ms. Preston would bring up the next item, because I'm sure you have some questions. I wanted to show you some things that we're doing to make sure that you can see systematically as a school district that we're really trying to help support the schools in some of these areas. This is called a student profile report. I've not shown this before, but I thought that it was relevant considering that if you're looking at the data. This is a really quick report that the teacher can use, and you can see that for this particular student in reading, really quick, it gives a color representation for the teacher. If this was a student scoring in the novice area, that tab would be red. Then it tells you the student scoring in the 71st percentile nationally, because remember that's compared nationally. It tells you that that student would be predicted to be proficient on the state assessment K-Prep, and that they're on track for ACT to score a 24. That's predicted. And that's as early as the 5th grade that a teacher can pull that. This is a new report that NWEA, the vendors of math, have created based upon feedback from school districts that can help them. But more importantly, you'll see this instructional area focus. So let's say if this was my child, I can see right here that it says literature is where my child scored lower. So I can click this, and I just captured a little piece of it. And this is from an actual student, so I've blocked out the name. It will show me that my child is ready to develop these skills in this particular standard in math. And so I know as a teacher that I need to work on area models or number lines representing fractions. So it really is a tool that helps teachers dig in a little bit more. So I thought that that was relevant to show you tonight. If you scroll another page, this is another report, because remember what I talked about with the map assessment, one piece of it that we really like is about growth. We want to make sure that we're focusing on every single child. Even our very top performing kids, we want to make sure that they're growing that typical growth. And so for this particular graph, you can see that there are 4 sections. If I'm a child, each one of these dots represents a student. And so if I'm a student in these 2 quadrants, then I did not grow at the same rate, or I guess that typical growth of all students in the nation that took this test at this time of the year. If I'm in these top 2 quadrants, even though I might not be at the achievement level of proficiency, right here I'm looking at that I grew more than the typical growth. I'm still not where I need to be, but I'm growing more than what most students did during that same time frame that took the test. The next one, we go another one. We go a little bit more, and this table shows you through the path of this child what their score was, so you can kind of look to see what their trend data is over all of the years. And then I believe the last item that I want to show you is this is something extra that our teachers work on, And you can see that it shows their September rent, their December rent, and then we have a formula that is called an effect size formula that we can look to see if a child is growing that typical growth. And so if this number is not a 0.4, we know that that's a child that we need to provide specific interventions for. So I felt obligated to let you see these pieces of the puzzle that we're putting together to address some of these scores that are not where we typically see them. Any questions?
Go ahead, Becky.
If they're not meeting their obligations, you say, and you see that they need that help.
Yes.
So there's rooms or teachers set up to help those students in those areas?
Each school has their own setup. For example, Calvary Elementary, at the beginning of the superintendent's report, if you notice that they were recognized by KDE as a site for RTI, and that's response to intervention. So that response to intervention is basically that school system that they put in place so that when they get data such as this, that they immediately start grouping kids in small groups or maybe individually, looking at specific skills. Teachers in their classroom are grouping kids. They're working, we have instructional assistants that work with kids. We have, we call it daytime extended school, like ESS. I don't know if you've heard of that. But that happens before school, after school, or sometimes we can have that during the day to go into the classroom and partner with the teacher. So every single child might need something different. And so that's what makes it a little challenging, is making sure you're working with that student exactly the skills that they need and also the way that they learn best.
So we have it from the time this program started all the way up to whatever grade you're in now.
From 2013, yes,
Okay.
when we first started giving the MAP assessment. Mr. Reed?
I know you're giving us sort of the 30,000-foot view, but do the teachers and do they, for instance, if I was a fourth grade teacher and my math scores in my classroom were lower than I expected, do I have the capability, and do they actually go in and say, what standards are my kids not getting?
Yes.
What standards do I need to either reteach or do I need to focus and emphasize moving forward?
Yes.
And who ensures that the teachers are doing that?
Who ensures that the teachers are doing that? Well, I would say ultimately the building level principal is going to ensure that. That is one of the key pieces of their professional learning communities. When that grade level team, or in some schools like Calvary that's smaller, it might be a great band of teachers. When they work together to look at the data, to share strategies, they also have their school RTI, I hate to use those initials, but response to intervention teams that look at the specific students and the skills.
Is it fair to say that what we're looking at right now is the halftime score?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
It's not the tournament.
right. So this is we now have an opportunity to bring our teachers together and go out and we can win the second half.
Absolutely. And I guess I would like to end with saying that, you know, some of our schools, we want a climate that our schools and teachers can creatively come up with innovative ideas to try differently to see if it works in their classroom. We have some of that going on in schools. And so whenever you try new strategies, there's the tendency of you're learning it as a team. And so they haven't had enough time in some instances to perfect that new strategy that they're trying in the school. So you want to allow enough time to see if that's going to work.
I've got just one quick, when is this updated then? Is it every month?
When will we take it, the
Yeah.
assessment again? The kids will take it again in March. So in April, April board meeting, you will have results again. And if we have these results in April, then We won't. We won't, right? We won't, right?
Now, when you have your parent teacher, is this when you sit with the parent, this is where your child is? Maybe you could work on these at home, as far as showing them the levels and stuff, or can they go online and see where their child is?
They actually don't have access to the student profile report, but most certainly, when we have parent-teacher conferences, we go over this. Even some schools, especially our Leader and Me schools, are doing the student-led conferences, which are really neat. The students are actually telling their parents about their data. And, the kids, this is just one data point. The teachers have their classroom assessments that give that more specific data, Mr. Reed, that you were asking about, that tells them, okay, this child is struggling with this particular standard. So they have their classroom data and just their knowledge of a teacher of working with those kids every day. They know that. So, when parents come in, they have those student data notebooks that the kids talk about with their parents. At the middle school, I know they had, I forget what they called them, but it was a data night, basically, where the parents came in and the parents kind of as a group went to a teacher and they explained not only their math assessment score, but their K-Prep score that they received. So we kind of have some group sessions with parents at the middle school and more one-to-one probably with the elementary.
Just in response to Caitlin's question, I've shared that this student profile is new this year. Math has not been a lot of the standards before. And when my teachers saw it, they were thrilled that now they can use this to better identify the standards. And they love these charts, and they were talking about having individual conversations with their students about showing them those charts, look where you've grown, or they were excited to be able to share that.
Are these individualized charts, are they something that teachers are going to share with parents, or is that more a teacher-specific tool?
It's a new report, and the way that they're printed, only that first page right now is printed, but most certainly that first page can be printed for parents. Absolutely.
Because I think, especially with those areas of focus, you can find a partner in the parent and say, this is where Johnny didn't do so well, so maybe these are some activities that you can work on at home. This is what we're going to be doing in class, so that learning doesn't stop when they leave school.
Absolutely. It lets you know, do I need to be reading at night some literature pieces, some more informational pieces, science, things like that. Absolutely.
Great.
Anything, anybody else? Okay, now you're up.
I'll go over here too, so that I can have a table on the money. I don't speak very loud, so.
Ms. Coconut, real quick, I just want you all to recognize what just happened. We had someone from the audience who had a question or a comment that was pertinent to what was going on here, and that person asked to be recognized, and they were allowed to speak and address the board. That needs to happen more often, and that's going to happen more often. So, Corey, congratulations for being the first person to try the new, friendlier, more responsive Board of Education. But we do need to listen to folks. So, please, if anyone else has any questions or comments, and the board chairman, I'm sure, will recognize you to make those.
Let me just say, and I agree that 100%, we want to be more friendly. So if any of y'all have comments, then absolutely, please make them. Thank you.
Financial report, you recall that I've got a one-sheet summary, and I kind of dig into this to see what variances, and I compare this year to date to last year. So I'm just going to go over what some of the larger variances, especially if it's a negative, it's an unfavorable compared to last year, it's positive, it's favorable. So I'll go first in the revenue. I talked last time about the beginning balance is about $477,000 less than last year, and that was because the general fund money was used to put a roof on West Michigan Elementary. That was kind of a one-time expense. The second area of interest is down slightly, just because our balances are down. The SEEK, and let me say too, I'm not gonna go into a lot of things this month, just the financial, just the basics, because we're gonna have some working sessions that will go into further detail on like budget issues. Interest was down, I already got that. SEEK is down, and I looked to see what, we're down 5.15 kids this year from the prior year. And so that is about 118,000 that will get less in SEEK than we got last year. So you'll see that it's a little down each month. I checked with Tim Lyons, and I had a conversation about what we project to end with this year, and it looks like we think that it'll be stable, so hopefully we can maintain the number. The Medicaid reimbursement section, that's the nurses that we talked about, and now this year, Lincoln Trail, we're paying the nurses, but that Lincoln Trail, we think that we'll get enough money to pretty much make that an even zero, hopefully balance. The federal revenue through intermediate, last time I wasn't quite sure, and that's the ROTC program that the high school has, and they reimburse us for those teachers. And it's slightly lower, and when I looked at this, I realized that in July, there was one revenue entry that was entered wrong, so it's really hasn't gone down, and that'll be corrected in January. The other category, the things that pop up, now we're getting preschool tuition this year, and we had a pretty significant building rental this year. So now in expenses, the unfavorable health attendance guidance, the nurses are paid here, so the nurse expense is down here, but the revenue is up here, and that's a change from last year. The board superintendent category, we had an increase in the liability insurance cost. The business support category, we had a number of consultants early this year because of the change in staff or the changeover.
These are the folks we brought in from KDE to help us
Yes.
during the interim
They
limits.
did the budget, they did some of the entries that needed to be made.
Those are going to be one-time expenses.
Right.
That's not going to be recurring.
Right, and that's,
Because you're good, right? You're not.
I've been that, well, I want that in the record.
It's in the record.
Student transportation, that's more in line now than it was. I think it was 14% unfavorable last month, and now it's just 4% unfavorable. And the differences in that are scattered throughout the different expenses. Fund transfers, as I said last month, it's just the timing of the KETS offers. You'll probably get 3 KETS offers pretty quickly, and that is, I forget, Kentucky Education Technology maybe, and that is where the state will make an offer that they will fund probably $50,000 to $75,000 in a year, and they will come to you and say, if you match it, then you can accept it. So it'll come in this form of offers, and you can match it this year, which we most of the time do, just so that we can have, we've got technology needs that we certainly want to do. Or you can escrow it and match it later if the funds weren't, if you felt like you didn't have the funds, but that's what that is. The cash balances, this December were 10.1 million in general fund. Last December, they were 10.8 million. Mostly that's because of that 500,000 for the roof repair. I also included, if you go, oh, you don't have this up. Yes, I'm sorry. I included the balances in the other fund so you can see, we can talk a little bit about it. We'll get into more of that when we do the budgeting session. But one thing that's changed is this special revenue fund. It was over $1 million negative last month. And so we caught that up, and that's a lot of grants, state and federal grants. We just haven't asked for the revenue. You spend it and then you ask for the money. So it's not uncommon for it to be negative for a little bit, but not $1 million negative. And then another thing that's different is building fund had a balance in there last time. Capital outlay, building fund, and debt service are kind of, you could almost put them together. If I was the accounting boss, I would put them all in one fund. So you almost had to add them together. I transferred the building fund to the debt service fund, and that's where our bond payments come out. We've started getting the property taxes. Before, I couldn't do that because there wasn't enough money in the building fund to do that. And the last report is a nickel tax update. We have, in the December financials, there's not any nickel tax revenue yet. The last month, I told you that they sent the two bills out separately, and we're going to, and they will account for them differently. You don't have the numbers, but I can read those as to what we've gotten in January for the nickel tax. We've gotten our first check. We've got a total of $429,776 so far. And the breakdown on that is real estate, $375,117, telecommunications, $477, tangible property tax, $23,148, merchants, inventory, $14,935, and then we pay commission to the sheriff of $16,117. So those will continue to come in. If they received a 2% discount if they paid that nickel tax by December 31st, and the face value is through January 31st. So probably most of those will come in there. Then you start the penalty phases, and that's on a different schedule than that first tax bill. So unless you have any questions, the only thing that I want to make sure that pretty soon we would need a date for the working sessions. And I'm sure you all will work on that. You have any questions? And I've got lots of numbers, and you can ask, when we get to the budget, I can show you as many numbers as you want.
Okay, no questions?
We're ready.
We'll move on.